Welcome, Malti. Welcome, everyone, to Author's Corner. Today, I have Malathi Ramachandran, and she is author of this latest book called Begum Hazarat Mahal. And Malathi Ramachandran has been writing for over 13 years now, and she has over 5 books, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken, over 5 books that are published. And
Yes.
today we are going to talk about a very interesting genre that I love to read, the historical fiction genre. And this book is called The Begum Hazrat Mahal. So, Malti, tell us about this book. Why did you choose this particular time in the history, which is 1857, let's say the rise of all the mutiny, the start of our independence movement? Why did you choose this time, and why this character was so fascinating for you?
Hi, Priyanka. Thank you for having me on this session to discuss my book on Writersmelon. Thank you so much. And to answer your question, I think I need to first tell my listeners that I'm very fond of history. I'm passionate about history. I'm passionate about travel. And I'm a writer. So when you put these three things together, you get a historical novel. We travel a lot within the country and we go to historical sites because of my interest. And what I find is there's always a little story out there. I won't say out there, it's below the ruins, hidden inside the ruins of these monuments and, forts and temples and monuments. You'll always find the germ of an idea. There's a story there, story of human suffering, maybe human experiences. And these stories are not known by people because history only tells you the larger narratives. It doesn't tell you the little stories of people and their human experiences. So when I listen to that, I know that there's something there that I would like to talk about. And in this way, I'm able to also convey to my readers the history of my country. So much is not known by people. For example, the book Hazrat Mahal. When I went to Lucknow, I discovered this story. And I know that there were many, many people who had not even heard of anything except her name. So when I used to tell people my book is coming out, it's based on Hazrat Mahal, they said, "Who is this?" And then there was a vague thing of something about the First War of Independence. I said, "Yeah, good, at least that much you know." Okay, so. So how this happened was we had gone to Lucknow and we went and saw all the places to be seen. And one of them was the residency. This residency is a very, very big walled cantonment of the British. In those days, the British resident used to live there, and he used to sort of administer Awadh. This was the capital of the district of Awadh for him, and he used to administer it there. And it's so big, it could take about 4 to 5,000 people, including the officers, their families. It had churches, it had mosques, it had everything you can think of inside. And there were banquet halls and officers' messes and all kinds of things. So when we went there, we saw some of the buildings broken down. Some of them are still intact. And what really touched me was the sight of bullet marks on all the walls of these houses and official buildings also. So when I saw that, I said, okay, there was a story here. People have suffered here. Whether it be British or Indian, it doesn't matter. People have suffered. So I decided to go back and read up about this. When I read up, I realized that there was the First War of Independence. That was when it was fought. And who was the person from the Indian side was Begum Hazarat Mahal, who had got a rebel army together. And she had actually held the British to siege inside the walls of the residency for a full 148 days. And that is a huge achievement against the British, because the British, as we all know, were very strong, and they had this at that point in time. It was only the East India Company which was administering the whole of North India and the eastern part of India. They had their capital in Calcutta. They were the ones in command and control, but they had been held to siege for such a long time, and that was something very interesting. So then I started reading up on Hazrat Mahal. Then I decided that I would write the story from both points of view, because that sort of gives me a chance to show. I'll just read two lines from my preface, which says, "History cannot be about just one point of view, nor can it be only about events. As famously said, history tells us what people did. Historical fiction helps us to imagine how they felt." So this is
Yes.
exactly the essence of why I write historical fiction, to know and to explore how people felt at that time, what were their relationships, what were their emotions and their feelings, and how they lived out their lives at that point in history. So that is how I came to write the book, Begum Hazrat Mahal.
Very well put. Thank you so much, Malti, for describing this. Um, when we talk about the whole rebellion of 1857, of course, our textbooks and
Mhm.
Bollywood tells us a lot of stories about Lakshmi Bai, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tatya Tope, Mangal
Mhm.
Pandey. Uh, we didn't hear a lot about Begum Hazrat Mahal, but I would imagine that they were probably contemporaries, and
True.
how their stories were different, and how did this mutiny get sparked, or was sparked? Because I think
Very interesting.
the one in the West was mainly because of that rule of inheritance that British had imposed, which is why these guys rebelled and then finally they organized it. So what was it
Hmm.
here? Why did this? What sparked it? Because I guess by that time Indians were pretty comfortable being ruled.
Absolutely. Correct, correct. So at that point in time, the Governor General was, he, in fact, that during the 1840s, this happened, that the Governor General was Lord Dalhousie, and he had brought in a doctrine of lapse, what they call as the
Yes.
doctrine of lapse, which gave him easy access to the princely states of India. He could annex princely states by using a rule which said that either you don't have a natural heir, which is what happened with Jhansi,
Hmm.
and the other one was, even if you have a natural heir, if there is misrule
Hmm.
in that state, it is
They
not
can
being
take over.
administered correctly by the ruler. They could take it away. They could annex it.
So it was the
This is
same.
exactly
It was the same principle here as well.
the same principle which was used to their advantage. Whatever
Advantage.
worked, they used that part of it.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
they did this with the Nawab of the 10th Nawab, Wajid Ali of Awadh, they said that it is misrule because he was a very flamboyant ruler
Hmm.
and he enjoyed his music and his dance and his poetry, and he held a very colorful court. And that made them put this as a reason for
Hmm.
misrule, which was not actually the case. And they managed to annex the kingdom of Awadh and sent him away, exiled him to Calcutta along with his court. At that
Okay.
point in time, his second Begum, that is Begum Hazrat Mahal, who was barely 36, 37 at that point in time, she refused to go with him. And she said, I'm not going to go with the court. I will be here and I'm going to make sure that my young son, that is 11-year-old Birjis Ali, I'm going to crown him as the 11th Nawab. I'm going to stay back. I'm going to fight the British. So when she stayed back, under her leadership, all the different factions of Lucknow and Awadh came together. People from the villages, from the towns, the rich merchants, the landlords, the Dalits, the higher caste Hindus, then the Muslims, everybody came below her and under her leadership. And they said they vowed to fight to get Awadh back from the British. So that is how the whole thing happened. And this was the reason why and of course, that was not the only reason. There were other reasons too. And firstly, the Nawab had been exiled. Second is there were tremendous tax burdens on the
Hmm.
landed and the merchant class, which the British had placed on them. Then there were the land laws, which had been changed to suit the British. Then the cloth weavers were suffering because the cloth was being taken. I mean, sorry, the cotton was being taken away to Manchester to make
Yeah.
into machine-made fabrics. So they had no jobs. It was deindustrialization of the cloth weaving industry. Then there were conversions that were going on, which was something that Begum Hazrat Mahal was vehemently against. She said that people are Muslims and Hindus are being converted to Christianity. So these were the various reasons
Hmm.
that sort of fueled the fire of rebellion.
Very well. Sometimes I find this is my privilege, that
Mm.
an author is actually telling me the story of the book. So I would really request all the viewers to please go and check this book and really get some of these historical facts correct. I think there is no other joy but to know the history of your country better. So thank you
Thank you.
once again, Malti, for
You're absolutely
introducing
welcome.
introducing this to us. Um, was talking more about Hazrat Begum Mahal, because clearly she was pretty much a rock star in those days. What are some of her qualities that really you could research upon or you could find out? And then in this book, how much of fictionalized characters bring life to the story or to the backdrop of historical events that are happening at that time.
Okay. So Hazrat Mahal's, there are few qualities that are coming to us through history books. We do know a little bit about her. We know that she had a great love for Awadh, and that was the driving force behind her reason to fight the British. So the love for Awadh, I have made sure throughout the book, it is very obvious. It is extremely, sort of pulsing. It's pulsing through the book, the fact that she loves her country so much, her state of Awadh, her kingdom of Awadh, and of Hindustan, what they called Hindustan in those days, the whole of Hindustan. So this was her first and most important, I would say, character trait that I would talk about. Second is she was a highly loyal woman. The Nawab Wajid Ali, before he left for Calcutta, actually he had divorced her. This a lot of people don't know. Just on a whim, he had told her, I divorce you, and he had got rid of her, and she had to leave her Chattar Manzil palace and move into a small place, which was actually the royal barber's house, which was converted to, and she moved into that. So Cholaki Koti, she moved into that in the premises of the same Kaisarbagh palace, and she lived there, but she was always loyal to Wajid Ali. She always, in her mind, she always thought of him, and everything she did was dedicated to him. And though they never met again in their lives after he left for Calcutta. So this was a great, I thought it was, this kind of loyalty is something very great to talk about. Then the third thing is, under her leadership, she brought the Hindus and Muslims together equally. She brought the higher castes and the Dalits together, as you can see in the book. And, she was, under her, this leadership style actually symbolized the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, what they call it. That is supposed to be very typical of Awadh and of Lucknow, the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. So that was another thing that she brought in. And then she opposed conversion, which was again, her passionate, this thing for the cause of the Hindus and Muslims. She was very passionately for the cause of these peoples. She didn't want them to be converted. Then the most important thing I would say is her feminist qualities. At a time which was nearly 200 years ago, when she was leading the masses, and it was she was a natural leader only because she was already in a position of power as the ex-Nawab's queen. But she did have a lot of feminism in her, which made her create a brigade, a sort of battalion of Viranginis, which were the female fighters. The women fighters of Awadh, all the women who came out from the villages, housewives, just normal women who lived in their homes in the villages and small towns, they said, we want to come and help you fight the British. So they came out and she formed a battalion of Viranginis. And that was her greatest thing, because even when Raja Jailal, who is her contemporary, who's a great close friend of hers and who respects her so much, when he says, you women cannot come into battle and fight, she says, we will fight. I don't care what you say. He says, no, women are weak. You cannot come into battle. She says, we will come. And she ensures that her women come and fight. And Raja Jailal finally concedes it to her that, yes, you all did a great job. You have held this place to you have helped us to hold the residency to siege for so many months. It's because of your contribution and your women's contribution. So these were excellent qualities about her, which I found through my research. And I also researched further and I built on it so that she becomes a very rounded character.
Understood. Malti, you have been writing, as you said, for over 13 years. And tell us more about your other books. What inspired, or what would you like to tell us about those books and your writing journey in general? Because we all know that writing is a very solitary journey. It's a very hard one. You need a lot of perseverance in it. So tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. So when I wrote my first book of full-length fiction, this was called The Wheel Turn. That was my debut novel. And it was again history, but it was not history as the other books are. It was a bit of military history. During 1962, you may be aware that the Chinese had made incursions into the northeast sector, where what is now Arunachal was, those days it was known as NIFA, Northeast Frontier Alliance. So at that point in time, there was a lot of insurgency coming in across the Thagla Ridge. The Chinese had entered India, and the battalions were sent out, the regiments were sent out from various places to go and fight. I'm the daughter of an army officer, and my father's regiment had been sent out. We were at that point in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. I was a very small child, and I remember still, I hold those things in my psyche, because I know that this has happened, and how the whole, you could say, the whole atmosphere, what happened to people and how people reacted. I know what happened those days. I was aware, I was absorbing it all. So this was my first novel where the regiment goes to war in the Northeast, and then the protagonist, the male protagonist, who's a newly married young man, a captain in the army, he gets taken prisoner of war by the Chinese. And then what happens? Does she move on? She waits for 3 years. He doesn't come back. And then what happens to her? Does she move on? If she moves on, what happens if he comes back? That is the story that I had written as my debut novel. That's
It's a
again,
book
as I
called
said,
The Wheel Turned.
The Wheel Turned. There is a symbolic Tibetan wheel, those little prayer wheels that you have. So she has this Tibetan prayer wheel, which somehow gently, whenever she moves it and she's really troubled, it does give her answers. So that is a little bit of the, I would say, myth or magic realism over there. So it does give her some answer there. But that was my first one.
This other book has a amazing cover, the book called Mandu, The Romance of Roopmati and Baz Bahadur.
Yeah, it has a beautiful cover. Niyogi books have some very good designers, and I think all the book covers, all the 3 book covers, the books that I've done with them are very beautiful. So The Legend of Kuldhara was my first historical novel, and that was set in Rajasthan, against that was set in Rajasthan against, a story of 84 villages in the desert near Jaisalmer. They just vacated overnight. People just abandon their homes and disappear overnight. Why? What? Nobody knows why. So I built up a story there of what stress and trauma the people went through. And then the protagonist is one of the headman's daughter, because they say that headman's daughter was to be taken away by the Diwan Sahib of Jaisalmer to join his harem. So that was the story, and I made her the main protagonist, and that was the story that has been very, very widely appreciated, that book. Then second was Mandu, which is set in Mandavgarh, near north of the Narmada in Madhya Pradesh. This is about Roopmati and Sultan Baz Bahadur. She is a peasant woman who sings very beautifully classical, and he's a singer and a poet. He brings her to his fortress and keeps her there, and their life just about starts opening up, and that time Akbar sends his army to take her away to Agra. So that is a story which is Mandu. Then this was my third book of historical fiction, which is Hazrat Mahal.
Amazing. So what is one thing that, or a quality that you think is like most important for an author to have, and you really admire in a writer? What would be that one quality? You could you could name 2 or 3 also.
I think the first one, most important, is language. These days, what's happening, I may sound very old school, but what's happening is the language is getting very, it's not a nice word, but bastardized. It's not sounding right, it's just not sounding pure and good. So it's got too many of, I don't mind Indian words coming in, because we are talking to Indians, but, the grammar cannot go wrong. We cannot play around with grammar. That's what I feel. That's the first thing. So language is very, very important. The richness of language, the correctness of language is very important. Then second thing is originality of thinking and expression. It's really important. Because remember one thing, that as they say, there are only 10 or 11 plots in the world.
Yes, exactly.
And whatever you write, it's going to come back to one of them. So you can't be very original in your story, but the way you express yourself has to be you. It cannot be, you cannot just be talking like any other author. So the originality of thought is very important. And the third thing is that power to stick on to the work. Most people start and then they leave it after 2-3 chapters, and then they say, no, I've got a mind block. I don't believe in mental blocks. I don't believe in writer's block. I mean, I may sound very, revolutionary in this, and I may sound like, I'm being very difficult, but there is no such thing as a writer's block. honestly. When you have the story in your mind, how can you not put it down? So for me, it's just about hard work, sitting at my comp day after day and writing. And when you write, it's a joy. Writing is a
Hmm.
joy. So there's no problem. It's not as if you're working at it. You're just working hard, but you're not really doing hard work. So that's how it is. So these are my points that I would give to any writer.
Thank you so much, Malti. It has been such a amazing conversation. I'm definitely going to finish reading your book, and I love talking about these very interesting historical characters that often don't find place in our history textbooks.
Very
And
true.
uh, and also the perspective is mostly missing in our textbooks, right?
True.
We consume history more as facts than as
Yes.
stories and as
That's
emotions.
exactly my
And
point. That's the thing that we have to humanize history to make it
yes,
interesting and palatable for us.
absolutely, absolutely. So really well done, and I wish you all the best, so that you
Thank you.
continue doing this and tell us more and more stories. I hope you visit more and more interesting places to get these ideas.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank, thank you, Priyanka. Bye.